Hey there YouTube, this is Michael with Zen on Tech Tutorials again. So I was considering what to do for my videos going forward, and for now what I'm going to start doing is an overview of each of the different components of Office 365, from Exchange to Skype to SharePoint, etc. Um, I'm going to go over Exchange today primarily. If you are coming from an Exchange environment or you're familiar with on-premise Exchange, really from '07 or 2010 on. Most of it's going to seem pretty familiar to you. If you're coming from a non-exchange environment, be it Google, whether it's Google Apps, Gmail, Lotus Notes, GroupWise, anything like that, then this is going to be completely different for you. Um, so just something to keep in mind there. So I'm going to start from the normal admin center here to get to Exchange. Just go to the admin center's drop down, and then I can pick any of these down here. And so once again, this is just on the test tenant that I've been using for the past videos now. So when we get to the Exchange Admin Center, we hit this screen here, basically giving us these options on the left-hand side, and then we also get all the options in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to go through it on the left-hand side and just go through each thing one by one and sort of do a high level on what each one is. So I'm going to start over here with recipients. So when we go and we take a look at the mailboxes list, the only one that should load if I have a license assigned to it is my default administrator account. But this list will show the regular user mailboxes. This isn't shared mailboxes, this isn't resource or room mailbox or anything like that. This is just the user mailboxes. So as you can see here, I can't create mailboxes in this list like you can in Exchange on-prem. To do that, I need to assign a license to an active user, or I can use a command called the new mailbox command in PowerShell, which is a temporary mailbox. But so once you do this, I can go in and I can either search if I have a lot of users in here. I can search for different people. I can just refresh this list without having to refresh the entire web page. If I go to the ellipsis here, I can add and remove columns, basically giving me more to filter these users by. Um, Default message size restriction, self-explanatory on there. Export data to a CSV, or there's advanced search, which is just more search options, basically. If I go into edit for the mailboxes, then I just get to view the different mailbox properties, some of which are actually over here on the right-hand side, but they're all also here. You can go ahead and if it's an account that you don't want people to see, then you can hide it from the global address list. So somebody actually needs to know the full email address to send an email to. They can't just search for it. Mailbox usage just shows reports of how big the mailbox is, last logon, things like that. Contact information, I don't have anything listed in here, but this is just if you set the information for your different users. If I go to the organization tab, this is intercompany information, department, titles, things like that. Email addresses, the SIP address is for Skype, so I'll touch on that in a different video when I do Skype. Primary SMTP is just the primary email address. Now I can go in here and I can edit these addresses, I can remove them, or I can add different addresses here. The main type of address that you would add here is just another SMTP address. So if I just do that, now I can go ahead and make that my reply address. I'm not going to, but I can hit OK there. And then so now if I were to save this, then I can receive email at the administrator at email address or at test at. But right now, because this one is capital SMTP, that is my reply from address. I'm going to take that off. Mailbox Features goes over the sharing policies, basically as far as individual sharing policies for FreeBusy and things like that for your calendar information. Role assignment policy, those fall mostly under the user roles, which I'll actually touch on in a few minutes. Retention policy is basically how long email is kept in the mailbox and how it's treated, whether it's archived, deleted, things like that. And address book policy, basically you can have different sections of your global address list, and that sort of dictates what group it falls into if you have them separated like that. So unified messaging, more of a Skype thing that I'll get into in a later video. Mobile devices, Activesync is just configuring the default profile. OWA for devices, that's an app in the Google Play and the Apple App Store. I can go and view more details on those. Email connectivity, Outlook on the web is just, if I were to go over here and click on Mail up here, that's Outlook on the web. So it's Outlook on the web. IMAP and POP3 are generally used for third-party mail clients. Outlook uses MAPI, which is preferred. Litigation hold is basically the ability to keep email even to the point where, say, an end user deletes something, whether accidental or on purpose, you as an administrator can still go back and retrieve those emails, which I will show you how to do that later on in this video. And archiving, basically, each user can have the option to have an archive mailbox separate from their primary inbox. The archive mailbox is usually included. It's usually part of that 50 gig limit unless you have an Exchange Online Plan 2 Exchange license, in which case that archive is a separate existence, basically. Mail flow, this is mostly for individual forwarding, message size restrictions, and delivery restrictions. This just goes and tells me what distribution groups I'm a part of. Mail tip, basically, the person that you're setting this on doesn't see this, but rather anybody that is sending to this person sees it. It doesn't alter anything. It's just, if a user's, I don't know, out of office and they forgot to set it, then you can set a mail tip for that time period. It's just a notice that comes up, really. Mailbox delegation, send as, send on behalf of, and full access. Full access, you can go in and you can actually access somebody else's mailbox. So if I go ahead and I give full access permissions here, then I'm saying that, whoever I put in this list has full access to my administrator mailbox. Send as literally just means user B will choose to send as user A. It will look as if it's coming directly from user A. Send on behalf of is going to be basically the email was sent by user B on behalf of user A. So it just depends how you want to set that. So I'm going to groups. This is distribution groups, dynamic distribution groups, and security groups. Distribution groups and dynamic distribution groups are generally both email enabled. You can send emails out to them. The only difference is dynamic groups are generally based off of a particular attribute or a particular setting on a user, and they are auto-populated based off of how you create that. You don't actually need to do them individually. You don't need to add users individually in that. That is what you do with a distribution group, not the dynamic groups. Security groups generally aren't used for email. They're mainly just used to group users together to set different security permissions. On my other active tenant, I have a security group that basically says, only these users can do OneDrive for Business e-discovery searches. Once again, that'll be a separate video. I'll probably separate OneDrive from the rest of SharePoint itself, actually. But either way, that's basically that. Resources. These are mailboxes you can create to represent physical items or conference rooms, projectors, like just any sort of a conference room. Basically, this mailbox represents that item. It can take meeting requests, and so that way other people in your organization know, hey, can I use this conference room? Oh no, it's booked for, I don't know, 1 to 2 p.m., whatever you set it for. These are meant to represent physical items or physical rooms in your organization. Contacts. You can add external contacts here. A mail contact is basically, say you have outside resources, outside partners that you work with. You want to add them as mail contacts. That way they're in your global address list. And that's another thing. Anything that you put anywhere between mailboxes, groups, resources, contacts, and shared is in your global address list unless you specifically mark one of the mailboxes not to be. If you create a contact, it's going to be in your global address list. Keep that in mind. If you want to do that in there, or if you want to do that in your own Outlook contacts. But like I said, maybe you have company-wide partners that you're working with, things like that, and you want to make the information easily accessible to anybody that needs it. You can give them the information here. Mail user is somebody. It's generally meant to be at your own domain here. This is somebody that is really generally used if you're doing an Exchange hybrid deployment with on-premise to 365, because if it's set up properly, all your on-premise users before you migrate them will show up as contacts. But they'll show up they'll show up in the contacts list, but they'll show up as mail users, not mail contacts. Shared mail, the share tab is for shared mailboxes. These shared mailboxes have the same 50 gig limit of a regular mailbox. They don't have the archiving though. They do not require a license. So say you have, um, you have a shared mailbox for HR or for accounting or something like that, and you have one mailbox, or maybe it's a support at email address, and you need a bunch of people to be able to access this mailbox, and you don't want to start consuming licenses for this kind of a thing. Just like with the mailboxes over here, you have the same options: full access, send as, send on behalf of. So basically, you can just create a mailbox for support at and give anybody that needs it full access to it. And that way, it'll show up in the Outlook web app, it'll show up in the Outlook client, and you're not using a license for that. Going to migration tab is actually the process of migrating to Exchange Online, whether it be from an existing Exchange on-prem environment or from somewhere else. The migrate from Exchange Online, just a note on that, that is only meant to be used and only can be used in a hybrid deployment with Exchange on-premise, and it is only able to be used to migrate mailboxes back to the Exchange on-prem location. You can't um, do it for an Imap migration or for a Lotus Notes or a GroupWise. Um, and it doesn't work with cutover or staged or things like that. It only works with a hybrid move. And so when I do migrate to Exchange Online, and I'm not going to go too much into this because I'm going to have a separate video for Exchange migrations. Basically, remote move is the hybrid migration where it actually physically moves the mailbox from your on-prem environment to the cloud environment. I can't do a cutover migration because I have directory synchronization enabled. A prereq of cutover is not directory synchronization. It cannot be turned on because just of the way it works. Stage migration, remote migration, those require directory synchronization. Stage migration is basically, I I look at it as a pre-hybrid migration. It's for 03 and 07, although 03 is long since out of support. And you can move users in batches just like you can with hybrid migrations. Only thing is with FreeBusy, with staged FreeBusy, like calendar information, things like that don't work because just of the vast difference in architecture of the on-prem environment to the cloud environment. Imap migration doesn't necessarily depend on directory synchronization or anything like that, but the identities, the users do need to be created. So whether it's directory synchronization, you did it with a CSV, or you just created it manually, doesn't really matter. But that's all I'm really going to go into this for now. I'm going to, like I said, when I do migrations, I'll do a separate video for that. And these are where migration batches will appear. The IMAP migration generally is for things like Google Apps or Gmail, things like that. Maybe if you have a personal account, you're migrating from, I don't know, Yahoo, Live.com, whatever it may be. Basically anything that's not Exchange, Lotus Notes, or GroupWise. I harp on Lotus Notes and GroupWise because those actually require separate tools, separate third-party tools to migrate. There's no built-in way to 365 to migrate those. But basically, if it's not an Exchange or if it's not one of those two, then it generally has an IMAP set. They generally have IMAP settings, so you can do an IMAP migration. I'm going to go to permissions. Got admin roles, user roles, and Outlook web app policies. I'm not going to go into each of these roles here because the descriptions are on the right-hand side, and you can just scroll through these and read these. But basically, these, just as it says, are different permissions for the admins to have. By default, you don't actually have everything. What I generally do is I go and I actually create a new role with all of the roles attached to it, and then I just and then I just assign myself to that. It's kind of referred to as like a super user or super admin. Super user, thinking of Linux. Anyhow, but that's basically all that is for the user roles. You can add more user roles here. Basically, it's just a matter of if they can manage their own profile information, they can manage their distribution groups, the members, their contact info, things like that. It's a lot more restrictive compared to the admin roles for obvious reasons. The Outlook web app policies, I'll actually go into this one and show you these settings here. So these basically the instant messaging is a Skype feature, but there's an area where you can go into the mailbox and you can actually use the web interface to IM people. Text messaging, unified messaging, once again more of a Skype feature, Activesync, contacts, basically just what you want the user to have access to when they go into their Outlook web app mailbox. More options here, and you get plenty of things here. And I mean, really, it's all pretty much self-explanatory once you go through these. But I'm going to go ahead and go to the compliance management. So this is where the in-place e-discovery and hold is. The in-place e-discovery and hold, and it says here that you can do them in the compliance and security center. I'm just showing it here because this is what I've been used to for a while, and this I still feel like is the easiest way for me to do it. You don't necessarily need to have a special kind of license to use this particular feature just to pull emails. You do need to have the Exchange Online Plan 2 license for the individual user to enable litigation hold. When you run an e-discovery search, you basically pull mailbox content. It'll pull information that's in a litigation hold for that user, as well as in the user's primary mailbox. So I'm just going to show you what the options are in here, because it's pretty extensive as far as what you can do in here. So I'm just going to give it a default name. Description doesn't matter. I can specify the mailboxes to search. Don't search any mailboxes, or I can search all the mailboxes in the company. So I'm just going to search all mailboxes, and you can do public folders here if you're using them as well. Next, and what I'm going to do is and actually I'm going to go back for a second and show you something on the individual mailboxes. Just give me 2 seconds here. That criteria option, I got to check my licensing and see why that was grayed out, but basically the criteria option here lets you filter based off of date, time, subject, message headers. It lets you do almost everything on there. And now it's mentioning that the in-place hold here, you can specify it if you want to, but if you don't have the appropriate licensing for it, which is the Exchange Online Plan 2, it's not going to do it. Basically, that puts that mailbox content on hold, so it can't be permanently deleted. Once you do that, then you hit finish, and then it'll run the hold. How long the hold takes just depends on mailbox size, really. So there's no way for me to give you an accurate description on that. If it's a small mailbox, it should be pretty quick. If it's a 30 gig mailbox, you might be waiting a while. Auditing. This is basically a logs. You have to have logging enabled for the mailboxes for this to work. I'm not sure if it is on by default or not, but it's a one-liner PowerShell command. I believe it's set-cas mailbox audit enabled true. If I'm getting that correctly, you might want to double check on that though. External admin audit log report. Basically, if you have a delegated admin, which is a partner basically, or if Microsoft makes changes to your account, then that will show that. The admin audit log is just for the listed administrators. And you can either just run it and view it, or you can export it to a CSV. Mailbox audit logs is basically if the non-owner access reports is basically if somebody accesses a different mailbox with full access permissions. If for whatever reason somebody's password got stolen, that won't show up because as far as Exchange Online is concerned, that was accessed with the correct username and password. That's the actual person. That just shows, like I said, full access permissions. That's for the non-owner mailbox access report. And basically, as far as the role group report, basically if any administrative permissions were assigned or removed, and you can also run an e-place, and then there's also the logs for in-place e-discovery and litigation hold report. So data loss prevention. Data loss prevention gives you certain things. Basically, you can set it to where users are either notified if they're putting something in an email that looks like a credit card or a social security number, and they can either be notified and it can say whatever you want it to. Hey, this doesn't meet your company's security requirements, or you can just outright block the message. Um, and I'm not going to go as far as how to create new custom DLP policies and importing them. I'm just going to go over the templates. Really, regardless of what country you're in and what kind of data you're dealing with, even the default policies are a handful. You can see here you have a lot of things that you can do here. I'm not going to go over these once again one by one, but you can create policies, you can import them from XMLs, you can do a lot of things. Retention policies. I'm actually going to touch on retention tags first. You'll see why in a minute. So retention tags, basically, these help you determine if you can set mail to be deleted in a month, like you see here, deleted per week, deleted per year, and you can create these policies to basically have a sort of a plan in place and have something in place to keep users' mailboxes grouped together. I'm sorry, not grouped together, but to keep their mailboxes clean, to keep them from getting too large, whether they're automatically moved to archive, whether the emails are deleted, however you want to do that. Retention policies is basically taking those retention tags and just grouping them together. That's all it is, because when you go back into the recipients and the mailbox features, you can apply the retention policies. Remember earlier I showed the retention policies. You can apply those to the mailboxes. You create the tags or you use the default tags and you group them together in policies, and then you apply the policies to the mailbox. Journal rules. Journal rules are if you have a need to basically log emails for any reason on an external source. External is key here. You cannot, the portal will not even let you use an Office 365 mailbox to do journal rules. The whole point of journal rules in Exchange Online is to have them on an external source. If you just want to keep the items in the user's mailboxes and you don't need them logged anywhere else and you just want to make sure that they're not deleted, don't bother with journaling. You're better off with archiving and litigation hold, honestly. Journal rules is I've seen certain people where they have different third-party applications like a Semantic Vault and things like that, and that has its own email address that Semantic gives them, and you journal to that other device. Um, if you have a hybrid deployment, you can journal to an on-prem mailbox, and technically you could then take that mailbox and migrate it to Exchange Online, but honestly don't do that. Like I said, the entire point of Exchange Online journaling is to keep it on an external source. You're completely defeating the purpose if you journal to a 365 mailbox. Go to the organization tab. Sharing is basically if I run an Exchange Online hybrid deployment, I'm going to see a sharing policy listed here for the FreeBusy information. This is basically sharing with your on-premise organization or sharing FreeBusy with partner organizations, things like that. And then individual sharing, self-explanatory, it's just for the individual person. Go to add-ins here. This is basically things that the users will see in their mailboxes. Action items, Bing maps, templates, suggested meetings, and unsubscribe, from RSS feeds, things like that. These are the default ones from Microsoft, or you can go ahead and you can just create your own. Once again, refresh the list and then edit them. And you can't delete the default ones, but you can just unapply the default ones and you can create your own. Going to protection. Protection, this is Exchange Online protection. This is Office 365's spam and malware filter, like Trend Micro or something like that. Malware filter, basically, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Self-explanatory. If Exchange Online detects an item that may contain malware, you choose what you want it to do with it. Um, Connection filter is basically filtering out if you have whitelist or blacklist that you have by IP addresses. That's the connection filter is. Spam filter is basically that, but for domains and for email addresses. Outbound spam is basically controlling your end users from sending mass emails. This is something that you may want to do or configure if you need to send out mass emails, maybe if you have marketing emails or things like that, or if you're trying to stop people from sending out mass emails, things like that. Quarantine is basically you can turn on quarantine and have emails, say you set up connection or spam filters, um, and you set up blacklists in them. Well, say you don't want them necessarily deleted. Say you want them to go into quarantine and you want to review them first and either choose to delete them out of quarantine or release them to the user's mailbox. That's what that's for. The Action Center, basically, as far as this will just tell you if anything has come up, really just any items that need attention, whether it's items in quarantine or anything like that. It's kind of hard for me to show you because I don't have anything in here. Because this is a test tenant, so I don't really do much of anything on here. Now the domain keys, identified mail, basically, and I'll be completely honest with you, I haven't gone too much into this, but basically this is for protecting senders and recipients from bad emails and things like that. These are the accepted domains that I have here. This.mail.microsoft.com got created when I did Activesync in the last two videos. And basically this just protects people on that piece and just lets them know that, hey, this actually came from somebody in your organization. This wasn't like a spoofing email or something like that. Mail flow. Basically, the rules are transport rules. You can choose basically anything you want here. You can do company-wide disclaimers, bypass spam filtering, filter messages by size. This is basically when an email from external comes into your Office 365 tenant, it's going to hit all your transport rules first. They'll appear down this list, whatever order you have them in. The arrows here let you move them up and down because whatever order you have them in is the order that the email is going to hit them in first. The lowest priority, it's a little bit backwards. The lowest priority is what it hits first. It starts off at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. The lowest number is what it hits first. If it doesn't apply, it'll just go on. Within each transport rule that you create, there's also an option that says stop processing more rules, basically meaning if an email hits that rule and it applies to that rule, then even if a later transport rule may affect that email, that particular email, it won't affect it because you told it to stop processing more rules in that email. Message trace. Message trace is more for a troubleshooting tool. User A sends to user B, they don't get it, whether it's from outside or inside. If it came through Exchange Online Protection, you can run this and see what happened in the email and sort of track it from there. Keep in mind, it really doesn't matter what time you set here in these fields on the start and end time. Even when I do custom and I set these times, when I run that report is going to be in UTC time. Why? I don't know. It's always going to be in UTC time. So keep in mind when you're running that report where you are located and take a look at how far ahead UTC/GMT time is ahead of you, and keep that in mind when you're looking at those message trace reports. Accepted domains is basically when you add a domain to the Office 365 tenant on the back of the main admin dashboard, and you do the verification, they show up as accepted domains here. Basically just showing what domain can be used for Exchange Online in your organization. Remote domains, I don't have anything here that's listed as the wildcard domain. Basically, if I had domains in my on-premise organization or somewhere else that I needed to list here to be accepted by Office 365, I would put them here. Connectors, I'm not sure if I still have anything here. I don't think. Yeah, okay. I actually still do have these connectors here from the last time I did a hybrid deployment. So I'm actually going to delete these. But basically, these are Mailflow connectors for an Exchange Online hybrid deployment, so it knows um, basically how to route mail if the recipient mailbox is not in Exchange Online. And you can create these manually for SMTP Relay or for partner organizations or things like that. I'm also going to touch on one more thing back in the accepted domains. As soon as this deletes, there's different options in the accepted domains where, say, I have my MX records pointing towards Office 365, but I'm in a hybrid deployment. What I would want to do is I would want to set my domain to internal relay. If I set it to authoritative and a user on the internet sends an email to somebody at michaelazure.com, and that user is on premise, but my MX records are pointing towards Office 365. If that domain is set to authoritative, Office 365 is only going to look on Exchange Online. If the email mailbox is not there, it's the user that sent the email is going to get a bounce back. If I set it to internal relay, that in conjunction with the connectors, 365 will basically see, okay, the mailbox isn't here, but it looks like per the settings on the domain, this isn't the only location where the mailbox should be. That's what it does for the domain, and then it will follow the connectors basically to wherever they're set to. Mobile. Mobile device access, and the mobile device mailbox policies. You've got a few options here. You've got a lot more options with Intune, which when I actually touch on it in my Intune video down the road, I'm actually going to be using my other tenant for that because I don't have Intune on this one. But basically, if somebody tries to connect and it doesn't meet your requirements, then it'll be quarantined, and you can view it, view the properties, refresh the properties, and then you can do different things here. You can go ahead and you can block the device, you can add the device, or you can just create rules for those particular objects. If you have a particular rule for iOS or for Windows or for Android, things like that. Device access rules is basically you create the access rules, and if it doesn't meet it, then it shows up in the quarantine and things like that. Mobile device mailbox policies. Basically, these are policies sort of like the OA mailbox policies from before. This is sort of what appears in the mobile mailbox, as well as different security policies requiring passwords, password lengths, requiring encryption on devices. Like I said, the options here are pretty limited. You'll see there's an infinite number of options compared to this on Intune. Public folders are kind of going away. I truly believe they're still just listed in Exchange Online because people still use them on premise to an extent, and it gives them a place to migrate it to. Really, you can create different public folders and set public folder hierarchy for mail and for calendar sharing and things like that. Honestly, if you don't have public folders on premise that you're not trying to move, just create a shared mailbox and or use SharePoint. It's a lot better than public folders. It's from trying to, and if you have them on premise, get them converted to a shared mailbox first. It's really just a lot easier to work with. It's a lot more streamlined. It's less of a headache. The bulk folder and the bulk folder mailboxes are basically the same thing as the shared calendars in Exchange Online and in SharePoint, combined with the functionality of a shared mailbox. Unified messaging. I'll do this more so. It's in Exchange Online because there are a few ties to it, but that's more of a Skype thing. I'll do that later on. And I already pretty much explained what Exchange hybrid deployment is in previous videos, and today this is just a place for you to set it up. If you have Exchange 2013 or 2016 on premise, you should see the exact same thing with the exact same setup wizard. But that actually, I didn't realize I was already at the end of the Exchange Admin Center. That pretty much covers Exchange Online. I'm not sure exactly what service I'm going to end up doing next week, but basically I'm just going to go down the list and sort of touch on the 365 services. As always, let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll be putting this video on LinkedIn as I usually do and adding it to the regular Office 365 playlist. Um, until then, I will see